The boutique smelled of white lilies, not pleasant, suffocating. The scent pressed against every surface, heavy, expensive, deliberately cold, as if the air itself had been trained to repel certain kinds of people. Rachel stepped through the glass doors at exactly 1:00 p.m. She paused just inside the entrance. She breathed. She let her eyes adjust to the light. The showroom floor stretched before her, vast, immaculate, and mercilessly bright. Crystal display cases ran the full length of both walls.
Wrong move. She just threatened the only person who actually owns the building. Let's get into it.
Silk gowns hung suspended from chrome racks, each one sealed behind rope barriers, each one tagged with a price that could feed a family for months. The Italian marble beneath her feet was polished to a mirror finish. It reflected everything. Her cracked canvas tote, her thrift store denim jacket, washed too many times to hold its color, her shoes clean but worn at the heels. She was aware of all of it. She had always been aware. Still, she kept her chin level. She kept her posture quiet, composed, deliberately still, because the act of walking into a room like this required a kind of armor that had nothing to do with money. She was 22 years old. She had aged out of foster care at 18. She had worked nights at a shipping warehouse for 4 years to afford the one semester of college that had led to this. A graduation ceremony. A dress. One dress. That was all she had come for. She moved toward the nearest rack, careful, deliberate, and unhurried. She reached out. Her fingers found the hem of a cream silk gown, soft and impossibly delicate beneath her touch. The tag read $4,200. She set it back. She moved to the next. $3,800. The next. $4,650. On her wrist, the cracked plastic face of her digital watch ticked forward. 1:04 p.m. Somewhere across the showroom heels struck marble. Sharp, precise, rhythmic, like a metronome set to contempt. The sound grew closer. Rachel did not look up immediately. She had learned a long time ago that looking up too quickly was its own kind of surrender. But she felt it, the weight of being watched. "Excuse me," the voice came from behind her left shoulder. It was not a question. It was not a greeting. It was a signal. Rachel turned. The woman standing 3 feet away wore a charcoal Prada suit tailored to the millimeter. A gold-plated clipboard rested in the crook of her arm. Her hair was set in an architectural chignon, rigid and deliberate. Her name badge read Victoria, General Manager, in beveled lettering. Her nostrils flared once a small, precise movement as she scanned Rachel from the canvas tote to the worn shoe heels and back up again. "Can I help you?" Victoria said. Flat, no inflection. The kind of sentence that was not actually an offer. "I'm just looking," Rachel said. "Thank you." "Looking." Victoria repeated the word, carefully turning it over as if it tasted wrong. She tilted her head. "At what specifically was graduation gowns?" Rachel gestured toward the display section along the far wall, measured steady and unhurried. "I have a ceremony next week." Victoria's eyes moved to the display and back to Rachel. Something shifted in her expression. Not confusion. Recognition. The specific recognition of a person who has decided before a single fact has been gathered exactly what category someone belongs to. "These pieces," Victoria said, "start at $3,200. The collection along that wall begins at $4,500. She paused. She looked at the tote bag. "I want to make sure you're in the right place." Rachel held her gaze. "I'm in the right place." A bead of silence expanded between them. Across the showroom, a cluster of wealthy patrons moved between displays, their laughter low and decorative. Nobody looked in Rachel's direction. Not yet. Victoria's jaw shifted forward, barely perceptible, the first small degree of a movement that would grow larger over the next 2 hours. She gripped her gold-plated clipboard tighter. "Our clientele," she said, "typically has an appointment. Do I need one to browse?" Victoria did not answer that directly. Instead, she turned slightly to the left and made a small two-fingered gesture toward the security guard stationed near the back corridor. The guard straightened. He did not move yet. He just straightened. Rachel saw it. She said nothing. She turned back to the rack. She reached for a gown again, midnight blue, long, clean lines, the kind of dress that did not announce itself. Her fingers wrapped around the fabric. And that was when she felt it, the sharp intrusion of someone entering her space. Victoria had stepped forward, angling her body between Rachel and the display, a movement that was not accidental and was not subtle. "I'd prefer you not handle the merchandise," Victoria said. Rachel looked at the gown in her hands. She looked at Victoria. "I'm a customer," she said. "This is a store." "This," Victoria said, "is the flagship Vance luxury boutique." She enunciated each word with the patience of someone who has explained rules to people she considers beneath the rules. "We have standards of engagement that we enforce consistently for all guests." Across the showroom, near a stack of display mannequins arranged in a service alcove, a young man in a stockroom uniform watched without moving. He was 19, wide-eyed and clearly uncertain whether what he was seeing was as bad as it looked. His name was Kevin. He had been employed here for 3 months. He had seen Victoria do this before, never quite this openly. He shifted his weight. He did not speak. Rachel set the midnight blue gown carefully back on the rack. She smoothed it. She stepped back exactly 1 pace, composed, small, deliberate, refusing to collapse the distance between herself and the woman who wanted her to collapse it. "I'd like to see that one," she said quietly, and pointed past Victoria toward the section of gowns displayed on individual stands. The centerpiece, a cream and gold graduation gown in layered silk, caught the chandelier light in a way that made it look lit from within. She did not know its price yet. She would look at the tag after she looked at the dress. That was the order of things when you had been doing math your whole life. She moved toward it. Victoria moved first. With 3 sharp, rapid steps, Victoria crossed the marble floor, reached the dress before Rachel, and pulled it from its stand. Not gently. The silk, bunched in her manicured grip, strained at the seam. "I'm going to ask you to leave," Victoria said. Her voice had changed. Lower now. Harder. The performance of patience was gone. "We have other guests, and I cannot have you disrupting the experience." Rachel stopped walking. She was 5 feet away. She stood still, her chin level, her chest lifting with a careful, controlled breath. She did not raise her voice. She did not step forward. Slowly, her right hand moved to her chest. Her fingers found the crescent-moon pendant at her collarbone, a small, tarnished thing on a thin chain, and pressed it lightly against her sternum. It was an old reflex, a private one, the kind of movement the body makes when the mind needs a moment to stay inside itself. On the back of the pendant, invisible from where Victoria was standing, an asymmetrical starburst had been engraved into the metal. The lines were not even. They were not decorative. They looked to anyone who studied them carefully like the edge of a custom design, like a signature, like a blueprint. But Victoria was not looking carefully. Victoria was already gesturing toward the security guard again. "I haven't done anything wrong," Rachel said. Her voice was steady, plain, and clear. "I came in to buy a dress for my graduation." "That's not what I see," Victoria said. "What do you see?" Victoria looked at her. Her expression was flat, certain, and utterly unmoved. "I see someone who doesn't belong here," she said. The lily scent pressed in from every direction, cold and white and ruthless. The chandelier above threw its sharp geometry of light across the marble. Rachel's digital watch ticked forward. 1:11 p.m. She thought about the warehouse, the night shifts, the 4 years of specific grinding purpose that had carried her to this moment, to a ceremony next week, and a single dress she had come to buy with her own money. She did not let any of that show on her face. She did not know why a black corporate Maybach had slowed to a stop at the curb outside, just visible through the boutique's glass facade 20 feet behind her. She did not know that a man in his 60s had stepped out of it, that he was standing on the sidewalk in a charcoal overcoat, holding a briefcase in one hand, looking up at the boutique sign with an expression that was difficult to name. Not nostalgia, not warmth. Something older and heavier than either of those things? She did not know any of that, but Victoria had just made a decision. And the boutique she thought she controlled was about to demonstrate exactly who it had belonged to all along. I said leave. Victoria's voice cracked across the showroom like a whip. Not a request, not even a command, a declaration loud enough to carry, loud enough to turn heads. And heads turned. The cluster of wealthy patrons near the far display cases went quiet. A woman in a camel coat stopped mid-reach toward a silk scarf. Two men in tailored blazers paused their conversation. A sales associate near the register looked up, then immediately looked down again. Victoria had an audience now. She had always performed better with an audience. She stepped forward, her gold-plated clipboard thrust out at a slight angle, pointing its corner toward Rachel's canvas tote, the way someone might gesture at a piece of garbage that had found its way inside. Her jaw was set forward, aggressive, deliberate. Her posture radiated a specific kind of authority, the kind that does not come from competence but from years of never being corrected. "You've been touching merchandise without permission," she announced. Loud, projected. "You came in without an appointment, you've refused to leave when asked, and now you're making my other guests uncomfortable." Rachel did not move. She stood with her hands at her sides, open, visible, relaxed. Her posture was quiet and composed. Her chin stayed level. "I haven't touched anything without permission," she said. "Browsing is not a violation." "Don't lecture me on policy," Victoria said, her voice sharpening. She took another step forward, closing the distance between them with the confidence of someone who has learned that proximity is its own form of pressure. "I know what I saw. I know what you are." The sentence landed in the room. It was not subtle. Several patrons heard it clearly. The woman in the camel coat glanced sideways at her companion. In the alcove near the mannequin stack, Kevin, motionless and pale, watched from behind a chrome rack. His hands had gone still at his sides. His face was tight-stricken and helpless, the expression of someone who understands exactly what they are witnessing and has no idea what to do about it. He had seen Victoria run people out of the store before. A teenager in sneakers last spring, a middle-aged man in a paint-stained jacket 2 months ago. Each time he had told himself it was policy, dress code, standard of the brand. This time, watching it happen to this particular woman standing this quietly, he was having difficulty locating that explanation. "I'd like to speak with someone else," Rachel said, measured, still, and flat. "A different manager or corporate contact." Victoria laughed. A short clipped sound, not amused, dismissive. "I am the general manager of this location," she said. "There is no one above me in this building." She lifted her chin, her diamond Rolex catching the light as she raised her wrist to check the time with the theatricality of someone who has somewhere better to be. "And in approximately 2 minutes, you're going to be explaining yourself to the police. So I'd suggest using those 2 minutes wisely." "You're calling the police," Rachel said, not a question. She was clarifying, making it clear. "I already did," Victoria said. The room went quieter. Not silent, quieter. The specific quiet of people who are watching something uncomfortable and have decided by consensus not to intervene. Victoria turned to face the room. She adjusted her clipboard. She smoothed her lapel. She addressed her patrons the way a host addresses a dinner party that has been briefly interrupted by a disturbance at the door. "I apologize for this," she said, her voice warm, now gracious, the performance switching registers with the ease of long practice. "We're handling it. Please continue." The camel coat woman offered a small nod. The two men in blazers resumed their conversation. The sales associate at the register found something to organize. Rachel watched all of it. She stood in the center of the showroom in her thrift store denim and her cracked face watch in the suffocating lily scent and the chandelier glare, and she watched the room turn away from her. She, the girl who had spent 4 years building a future from scratch, remained perfectly still. Victoria turned back to her. The warmth was gone again. What replaced it was cold, sharp, and direct. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" She took one more step forward. Her voice dropped private, now intended for Rachel, and not the room. "I see someone who wandered in off the street. No appointment, no account, no references, carrying—" She glanced at the canvas tote. "That." She let the words sit alone. Rachel said nothing. "People like you," Victoria continued, "come in here sometimes. You think if you stand there long enough looking at things you can't afford, something changes. It doesn't. The dress doesn't change. The price doesn't change." Her voice took on a deliberate precision, each word placed like a step. "And you don't change." The chandelier light fell between them, hard and bright and cold. Rachel's digital watch ticked forward. 1:14 p.m. Victoria leaned in one last degree. Her voice was almost gentle now. "You have no family here," she said. "You have no connections. You have nothing that makes this conversation go any other direction." She straightened. She lifted her clipboard. "No one is coming for you." Rachel's hand found her pendant again. Her fingers closed around it, automatic steady. The tarnished crescent-moon pressed into her palm. The asymmetrical starburst on its back pressed against the inside of her fingers where no one could see it. Her face was completely still. In the alcove, Kevin had stopped breathing. He had heard every word. He knew in the specific way that witnesses always know before they can prove anything that he was watching something he would not be able to forget. He had also heard something else earlier that morning from a senior stock manager who had come down from the regional office to drop off a shipment. A side comment. A warning passed between coworkers. That the billionaire who owned this entire chain was in the city today. That he was conducting unannounced inspections. That last Q3 general managers had been terminated on the spot for failing what the regional office quietly called compassion audits. Kevin had not thought about that again until right now. The police sirens had not arrived yet. But outside the boutique's glass facade, a long black Maybach remained parked at the curb. Still. Waiting. Victoria smiled. She had no idea whose empire she was dismantling with her own hands. The first thing Rachel did was speak clearly. "I want to state for anyone listening," she said, her voice carrying across the showroom without rising, "that I am a paying customer. I have not stolen anything. I have not threatened anyone. I have not broken any law." Victoria's expression shifted. Not retreat. Recalibration. "She's making a scene," Victoria announced to the room. Loud, bright, performative. "This is exactly the behavior I was describing." "I'm speaking," Rachel said. "That's not a scene." The wealthy patrons had stopped pretending to browse. The woman in the camel coat had her phone out, angled low. One of the men in blazers had turned fully toward the confrontation, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The sales associate near the register had gone completely rigid. The room was a camera. Every surface, every angle, every expensive polished reflection was recording this in the way that rooms record things in memory, in posture, in the specific arrangement of people who will later say they were there. But there was one actual camera. In the alcove, Kevin's hand moved to his pocket. Slowly, silently, and without announcement. His phone came out. His thumb found the live stream button. His hands were not entirely steady. His face was tight, pale, and resolved. He had made a decision. He did not know yet what it would cost him. He pressed the button anyway. The stream began. No title. No introduction. Just the showroom. The light, the two women, and the silence pressing in from every direction. "I'd like to purchase the midnight blue gown," Rachel said. She turned to the display rack and reached for it, controlled, deliberate, and unhurried. Victoria moved. She crossed the marble floor in 4 sharp steps. Her hand closed around the gown's hanger above Rachel's grip. She pulled. The silk twisted, strained, and bunched violently in her fist, the delicate fabric gathering into a crushed mass in her manicured hand. She stepped back, taking the gown with her. "You do not touch the merchandise," she said. "You just pulled it from my hands," Rachel said. "I removed it from an unauthorized individual." Victoria set the gown on the display counter behind her, smoothing it once, a proprietary gesture. She turned back to Rachel. Her posture was wide-planted, occupying the center of the floor. "The police are already en route. You can explain yourself to them." Rachel looked at the gown. She looked at her own hands still open at her sides. She looked at Victoria. She did not step forward. She did not raise her voice. She said nothing. That silence, controlled, absolute, and deliberately chosen, was more precise than any argument she could have made. It filled the room completely. Victoria felt it. Something in her expression shifted, a hairline fracture of uncertainty gone in under a second. She covered it the way she covered everything, with escalation. She lifted her phone. She dialed. "Yes, this is Victoria Haynes, general manager at the Vance Luxury flagship," she said. Her voice was crisp, authoritative, and entirely performed. "I have a situation on the floor. We have a vagrant, a young woman who forced her way into the boutique, attempted to steal merchandise, and is now refusing to vacate." She paused. She looked directly at Rachel as she said the next part. "She has no family, no connections, no one who will be looking for her. This is street trash. I need officers here immediately." The room was absolutely silent, not the gentle, ambient silence of a luxury boutique, the hard, excruciating silence of people hearing something they cannot unhear. Phone cameras were up, now open, no longer pretending. The camel coat woman had stopped angling hers low. The 2 men in blazers both had theirs raised. Kevin's stream was live. The viewer count was climbing. 40, 90, 212. Rachel stood in the center of all of it, motionless, silent, completely composed. Her face was a mask of icy dignity, precise and deliberate, the face of someone who has decided in advance that they will not give this moment the reaction it is trying to extract. Her eyes were dry, her jaw was set, her hands were open and still at her sides, not because she was unaffected, because she had made a choice about what she would and would not allow to be taken from her. Victoria ended the call. She lowered the phone. She looked at Rachel with an expression of complete, smug, triumphant certainty. "They're 4 minutes away," she said. "I heard," Rachel said. "You should be thinking about what you're going to tell them." "I've been thinking," Rachel said, "about what you've been saying on camera." Victoria's eyes moved. A quick, involuntary sweep of the room. She registered the phones, the open streams, the angles. Her jaw tightened once. She recovered. She straightened her lapel. She lifted her clipboard. "Record whatever you like," she said. Her voice was smooth, steady, and certain. "I am the general manager of this location. I have full authority over conduct on this floor. What you're seeing is standard security protocol for a suspected theft situation." She turned to address the room, the phones, the cameras, all of it. "I have done nothing wrong. This individual was attempting to steal a $4,000 gown. The footage will show exactly that." Kevin's viewer count hit 840. He said nothing. He kept the frame steady. He made sure Victoria's face was in it. He made sure her name badge was readable. Outside, the sirens were louder now, close. Victoria turned back to Rachel. She smiled. Full, certain, radiant, with the specific confidence of someone who has never in all their years of this faced a consequence. "Security," she called toward the guard near the back corridor. "Lock the front doors." The heavy brass bolt slid home across the glass. The click of it echoed across the Italian marble, sharp and definitive, like a trap snapping shut. Rachel heard it. She did not turn toward the door. She looked at Victoria. She held the pendant at her collarbone, one breath steady and quiet. She was thinking about something else now. Not the sirens, not the locked doors, not the phones recording from every angle. She was thinking about the engraving on the back of the pendant, the one no one here had thought to look at, the one she had carried for 22 years without knowing what it meant. Victoria thought she was calling for backup. She had no idea what she was actually calling in.
Wait, she locked the doors and called the police on a paying customer just for holding a dress. If that were me, I would have lost my temper immediately. Imagine being completely surrounded by wealthy people watching you get treated like a criminal. The audacity is real.
Rachel turned toward the exit, not running, not rushing, walking with the measured, deliberate calm of someone who has decided that the only dignified response to a locked room is to walk toward the door anyway. She made it 6 steps. The security guard moved to block her path. He was broad, unhurried, and entirely certain of his position. He planted himself in front of the brass-bolted doors with his arms loose at his sides, his expression flat and professional. He was not threatening precisely. He was simply immovable. Rachel stopped. She looked at the doors. She looked at the guard. She looked at the bolt. She turned back toward the room. The showroom had reorganized itself around the confrontation. The patrons were no longer pretending to be anywhere else. They stood in loose clusters, phones raised silent, watching with the particular stillness of people who are aware they are present at something they will describe later. The camel coat woman had moved closer. The 2 men in blazers had not moved at all. The sales associate near the register had pressed herself flat against the back wall as if reducing her profile might remove her from the situation entirely. Kevin had not moved either. His phone was level. His frame was steady. His viewer count had crossed 4,000. Victoria stood in the center of the floor, arms crossed, her posture set in an expression of absolute smug victory. She had the clipboard tucked under one arm. Her diamond Rolex caught the light as she checked the time. Unhurried, theatrical, a woman performing patience for an audience she knew was watching. "There's nowhere to go," she said. Her voice was pleasant now, almost warm, the warmth of someone who has already won and is simply waiting for the other person to acknowledge it. Rachel did not respond. She stood with her back straight and her hands open at her sides. Her chest rose and fell with careful, controlled breaths. Her eyes moved across the room, not frantically, not with panic, but with the precise, methodical attention of someone taking inventory. One exit, bolted, guard in place. One secondary corridor to the back, probably locked as well. No second floor. No exterior windows at ground level that opened. She was trapped. That was the simple fact of it. She was standing inside a sealed room on the wrong side of a brass lock in a building full of people with phones pointed at her, waiting for the police to arrive and confirm whatever story Victoria had already told them. Her digital watch read 1:24 p.m. Outside, the siren split into 2 distinct wails, then 3. Close. Very close. The classical music playing through the boutique's overhead speakers, a Debussy piece, light and delicate and completely indifferent, continued without interruption. Victoria heard the sirens too. Her smile widened. Just slightly. Just enough. "Here they come," she said. Rachel's eyes moved to the front windows. 2 police cruisers pulled to the curb in tight succession, their lights rotating blue and red across the boutique's glass facade. Officers stepped out. Deliberate, radio chatter audible even through the thick glass. And then something else. The black Maybach was still there, parked 10 feet beyond the cruisers. Its engine was off. Its windows were dark. No one had moved to get back inside it. Rachel had not noticed it before. She noticed it now. A man in a charcoal overcoat was standing on the sidewalk beside it, motionless, watching the police cruisers. He was older, silver-haired, and still in the way that people are still when they are doing the specific work of deciding something. She could not see his face from this angle. She could only see his posture, straight, controlled, the posture of someone accustomed to a room reorganizing itself around their presence. He did not look hurried. He did not look alarmed. He looked like someone who had just arrived somewhere important and was taking one final moment before walking through the door. Victoria had not seen him. Her attention was entirely on the police officers crossing the sidewalk toward the entrance. "Unlock the doors," she said to the security guard. "Let them in." The brass bolt slid back. The glass doors opened. Two officers entered the boutique, their shoes striking the marble with a different quality of sound than Victoria's heels. Heavier, more final. The room rearranged itself again instinctively, everyone stepping back a degree. The lead officer scanned the floor. His eyes moved to Victoria, they moved to Rachel, they moved to the phones. "Who called this in?" he said. Victoria stepped forward. Her posture was open, composed, and authoritative. She extended her hand. She smiled. "I did, officer. Victoria Haynes, general manager. Thank you for your prompt response." She gestured toward Rachel with her clipboard. "That individual has been attempting to steal merchandise, refused to leave when asked, and has been verbally aggressive toward my staff and guests." The officer looked at Rachel. Rachel said nothing. She stood exactly where she had been standing, composed, motionless, completely still. "Ma'am," the officer said to Rachel, "can I see some identification?" "Of course," Rachel said. She reached into her canvas tote. She produced her wallet. She handed over her ID, clean, steady, one motion. The officer examined it. He handed it to his partner. Victoria watched this exchange with her arms crossed and her jaw forward. "She forced her way in," she added. "Refused multiple requests to vacate. She has no business being here." The second officer handed the ID back. The lead officer looked at Rachel. "I'm going to need you to step to the side with me," he said. "She needs to be in handcuffs," Victoria said. Her voice was crisp, certain. "She put her hands on me. I want her detained." The lead officer looked at Victoria, then back at Rachel. Then he reached for his cuffs. Rachel's eyes closed. One breath. The cold lily scent pressed against her from every direction, suffocating, relentless, and expensive. She had done nothing wrong. She had said all the right things. She had stayed completely still. None of it had mattered. Outside, the silver-haired man in the charcoal overcoat had turned from the police cruisers. He was looking at the boutique now, at the sign above the door, at the name spelled out in brushed gold lettering. His name was on that sign. He reached for the door. If you want to see how this elite manager's arrogance becomes her ultimate devastating downfall, you know what to do. Now back to Rachel. The handcuffs were cold. That was the first thing. Not the sound of them, not the click, not the officer's voice telling her to stay calm. The cold. The specific unyielding cold of steel against the inside of her wrists, pressing into skin that had never done anything to deserve it. They walked her to the display case along the far wall. The officer's hand was on her shoulder, firm and impersonal. He pressed her forward gently but without question, and her cheek came to rest against the glass. Cold there, too, hard and flat and merciless. She closed her eyes. Around her the boutique continued, heels on marble, the Debussy piece cycling back to its opening measures. The soft, decorative murmur of patrons who had witnessed everything and were now speaking to each other in low voices, the way people do when they want to process something without being seen processing it. Victoria stood 10 feet away, clipboard in hand, watching with her arms loose and her posture easy, satisfied. The expression on her face was the expression of a person who has spent years engineering moments exactly like this one and is finally watching one land perfectly. "Make sure that's documented," she said to the lead officer. "I want a report filed. Attempted theft, trespassing, verbal assault." The officer nodded. He was writing something. Rachel pressed her forehead against the glass case. She kept her eyes closed. She breathed. This was the thought that came not with drama, not with force, but with the quiet, grinding weight of something true. Is this how it always works? She had spent 4 years being careful. 4 years being quiet, composed, correct, and precise. 4 years making sure that every move she made in every room like this one was defensible. Correct posture, correct language, correct behavior. She had studied the rules of the spaces that were not built for her, and she had followed them exactly because she had believed in the specific way that people who have nothing believe things that the rules would protect her if she followed them closely enough. But the rules were not protecting her. The rules were being used against her. The story had already been written before she walked through the door, and no amount of composure or patience or correct behavior had the power to revise it. The handcuffs bit into her wrists. She did not move. Money speaks, she thought, and the innocent are crushed in silence. She thought about her graduation 1 week away, the ceremony she had worked 4 years toward. The single specific future she had constructed carefully from scratch in the dark, without help, without family, without anyone who had ever shown up in a room and said her name with authority. She thought about the dress she had come here to buy with her own money. She thought about the warehouse, the night shifts, the fluorescent lights at 3 a.m., and the specific private dignity of earning something. All of it, she thought. All of it undone by a woman with a gold clipboard and a story she told before Rachel had finished walking through the door. A single tear escaped, just one. It ran down her cheek and reached the cold glass of the display case and stopped there. She did not wipe it. Her hands were behind her back. In the alcove, Kevin watched. His phone was still live. His viewer count had crossed 11,000. His face was wet. He had not noticed when that had happened. He was 19 years old, and he had a decision to make, and he was making it slowly in real time on camera in front of 11,000 people who were watching a young woman in handcuffs lean her face against a glass case for the crime of trying to buy a dress. He kept the frame steady. He kept recording. Victoria turned to address the room. She straightened her lapel. She smiled at her patrons. Again, she said, warm, gracious, and serene, "I apologize for the disruption. We'll have the floor back to normal shortly." The glass doors opened. Rachel did not look up. She heard the doors. She registered the change in air, a brief intrusion of outside cooler and less lily-scented before the boutique sealed itself again. She heard footsteps on the marble, different from the others, slower, more deliberate, the footsteps of someone who was not hurrying because they had never needed to hurry. She kept her eyes closed. The footsteps stopped, not slowed, stopped, fully, completely. As if the person walking had encountered something that required them to cease all forward motion and simply stand. Victoria looked up from her clipboard. She saw the man in the charcoal overcoat standing just inside the doors, silver-haired, still, his briefcase held at his side, his face arranged in the specific, terrifying blankness of corporate fury, so controlled it had become its own kind of silence. Her expression shifted immediately, reorganized. She straightened. "Mr. Vance," she said. Her voice was bright, composed, and entirely certain. "I wasn't expecting you today. We have a small situation under control, nothing that will affect your inspection." Richard Vance did not look at her. He was looking across the showroom floor, at the display case along the far wall, at the young woman pressed against it in handcuffs, at the way the chandelier light, hard and precise and perfectly positioned, fell across the pendant hanging at her collarbone. The pendant had swung forward when the officer pressed her against the case. It dangled now on its thin chain, turning slowly in the still air, catching the light on its tarnished face and then on its back. The asymmetrical starburst on its reverse side caught the chandelier beam for exactly 1 second. Richard Vance stopped breathing. His briefcase hit the marble. The sound rang across the entire boutique, sharp, final, and absolute. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Victoria turned too. She looked at the briefcase on the floor. She looked at her CEO. She looked at his face. She had never seen that expression before. She did not have a category for it. She smiled, uncertain now, reaching for composure. She had no idea he was staring at a ghost. Richard moved. Not fast, not with urgency. With the absolute, unmistakable certainty of a man who has just understood something that rearranges every fact he thought he knew and is walking toward it before his mind has finished processing what his body already knows is true. The patrons parted, not because he asked them to, because something in the quality of his movement made parting feel instinctive. He crossed the showroom floor in 12 steps. He stopped at the display case. He looked at the young woman pressed against it, her cheek against the glass, her wrists locked behind her back, her face turned away from him. "Officer," he said, quiet, completely level. The lead officer looked up from his notepad. "Release her." The officer blinked. "Sir, we're in the middle of a—" "Release her." Same volume, same register. The tone of a man who has never needed to raise his voice to be the most powerful person in a room. The officer looked at Victoria. Victoria stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, I appreciate you being here, but this individual was attempting to steal merchandise and assault my staff. The situation is fully documented and the officers are—" "I am not speaking to you," Richard said. He did not look at her when he said it. He was still looking at the pendant. The room went very still. The officer hesitated. 1 second. 2. Then he reached for his keys. The handcuffs opened. Rachel brought her hands forward slowly. She straightened. She turned. She looked at the silver-haired man standing 18 inches from her, and she did not know him. She had never seen his face. She had no frame for why a man in a charcoal overcoat had just walked across a boutique floor and told a police officer to release her with the quiet, absolute authority of someone who does not negotiate. She looked at him steadily, composed and cautious, waiting. Richard looked at the pendant. He reached into his coat. He produced his briefcase, set it on the display case beside them, and opened it. His hands moved through its contents with the careful, deliberate precision of someone who has carried the same documents for 22 years and knows exactly where each one is. He produced a folder, aged, the edges soft with handling. He opened it. Inside was a photograph, a jewelry blueprint, and a police file dated 22 years ago. The blueprint was a custom design. A crescent-moon pendant with an asymmetrical starburst engraved on the reverse. Every line, every angle, every measurement was there, exact and specific and unmistakable. He held it beside Rachel's pendant without touching either one. The room looked. The officers looked. Kevin's camera looked steady and unblinking, capturing every detail. The engraving matched. Perfectly. Not approximately, not closely, perfectly. Richard closed his eyes. He opened them. "Where did you get this necklace?" he said. Not an accusation, barely a question. The voice of a man already certain of the answer, asking only because he needs to hear it spoken aloud. "I've had it my whole life," Rachel said, steady, quiet. "It came with me through the foster system. It's the only thing I've always had." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Richard reached back into the folder. He produced a second document, a hospital record, a birth certificate, a missing persons file 22 years old bearing the name of an infant girl removed from a private clinic under circumstances the file described as irregular. The birth date on the file matched Rachel's age exactly. The pendant was listed under personal effects. He looked at her face. He looked at the line of her jaw, the set of her eyes, the specific arrangement of features that he had been looking for in every room he had entered for 22 years without allowing himself to say out loud that he was still looking. His corporate mask, the one that had held through 3 recessions, 2 hostile takeovers, and 1 grief that had never fully closed, came apart. Not dramatically, not all at once. Like something that has been held very tightly for a very long time and has simply finally been allowed to stop. His eyes filled. He did not look away. "Your name," he said. "Your full name." "Rachel," she said. She paused. "Rachel Ann Vance." She looked at him. That's what was on my intake file. I never knew what it meant. Richard Vance dropped to one knee on the Italian marble floor of his own boutique. The room did not breathe. Kevin's viewer count crossed 47,000. He did not move. He did not speak. He kept the camera exactly where it was. Victoria had gone completely white. Her clipboard was still in her hand, held now at her side, forgotten. Her jaw was open. Her arrogant sneer had collapsed into something that had no name, something between terror and the specific, paralyzing recognition of a person who is understanding in real time the full scale of what they have done. She had physically shoved this woman. She had screamed at her. She had called the police and told dispatch that this person had no family, no connections, no one who would come for her. She had done all of it loudly on camera in front of 11,000 viewers, who were now 47,000 viewers in a building whose name was on the man currently kneeling on the floor in front of the woman she had tried to have arrested. Richard rose. He turned to face the room. His eyes were wet. His posture was straight. He looked at the lead officer. "This young woman has committed no crime," he said. "She is the sole heir to the Vance Group. She is, as of this moment, the most protected individual in this building." He looked at Kevin, at the phone, at the live stream. He nodded once. Then he turned to Victoria. He looked at her for a long moment, quiet, measuring, taking in the clipboard, the Prada suit, the Rolex, all of it. His expression was not angry. It was something more precise than anger. "You told the 911 dispatcher," he said, "that she had no family. No connections." He paused. He looked at Rachel. He looked back. "You said no one was coming for her." Victoria opened her mouth. "I have reviewed the conduct codes for this location." Richard continued, his voice measured, deliberate, and fully controlled, including the physical contact prohibitions, the anti-discrimination protocols, and the false reporting statutes. He reached into his briefcase again. He produced a second folder, thinner, newer, tabbed with color. "Every violation you committed today is documented in this building's own policy manual. The manual you signed when you accepted this position." He set the folder on the display case. He did not open it. He did not need to. Victoria's face had gone from white to something grayer. Her hand tightened on the clipboard once and then went slack. The hunter had just realized she had locked herself in a cage with a lion, and the lion had brought the paperwork. Richard turned to the lead officer. He did not raise his voice. He did not gesture. He simply turned, and the quality of his stillness made the gesture unnecessary. "Officer," he said, "I need you to review something." He reached into the open briefcase and produced a single printed document, clean, formal, and precise. He handed it across without ceremony. The officer took it. He read. His expression shifted once quietly in the specific way that expressions shift when a situation reclassifies itself entirely. "This is a formal complaint," Richard said, "filed with this city's district attorney's office, time-stamped 40 minutes ago, regarding false emergency reporting and physical assault committed against an individual on these premises." He paused. "The individual in question is my daughter." The officer looked up from the document. He looked at Rachel. He looked at Victoria. Victoria's clipboard hit the floor. The sound it made was small, hollow. The gold-plated surface struck the Italian marble and skidded 2 feet and stopped face down, utterly still. Nobody moved to pick it up. "The live stream," Richard continued, turning toward Kevin, "constitutes witness documentation of the assault, the false 911 call, the unlawful detention, and the discriminatory conduct. All of it recorded, time-stamped, and currently accessible to 47,000 viewers." He looked at Kevin directly. "You kept the frame steady." Kevin nodded. His face was wet. His hand was not entirely steady now, but his phone remained level because some decisions once made do not get unmade. "Thank you," Richard said. 2 words. Quiet, direct, and completely serious. Kevin looked down. He looked back up. He said nothing. He kept recording. Richard turned back to the officer. The complaint includes 3 specific charges: false emergency reporting, physical assault, unlawful detention of a private citizen. He looked at Victoria. All 3 are supported by the footage currently streaming. Victoria had not moved. She stood in the center of the showroom floor in her charcoal Prada suit in front of the patrons and the phones and the 47,000 people watching a screen somewhere, and she was diminished. Not by anything Rachel had said. Not by anything Rachel had done. By the specific, terrible weight of her own actions returning to her now from every direction at once. Her face was wrong. The arrogance was gone. The certainty was gone. The performative warmth was gone. What remained was rawer, smaller, and genuinely afraid. The lead officer looked at his partner. A single exchange. Wordless. The kind of communication between colleagues who have both understood the same thing simultaneously. He walked toward Victoria. "Ma'am," he said, "I need you to turn around." Victoria looked at the officer. She looked at Richard. She looked at Rachel. Rachel was standing beside her father, straight, quiet, and composed. Her wrists were free, her chin was level, her hand was no longer at her pendant. She did not need it there anymore. She looked at Victoria without expression. Not cruelty, not triumph, simply looking steady and clear the way you look at something you have already decided not to carry with you. "Please," Victoria said. Her voice cracked on the word. Thin, unsteady wrong in her own mouth. "I was doing my job. I was protecting the store. I didn't—" "Turn around, ma'am," the officer said again. Firm. Final. Victoria turned. The handcuffs came off the officer's belt. The same handcuffs. The exact same model, the same weight, the same cold steel that had been locked onto Rachel's wrists 12 minutes ago against a glass display case. They clicked shut on Victoria's wrists with the specific sound of something symmetrical completing itself. The room heard it. Every person in that boutique heard the click and understood what it meant, not legally, not technically, but in the deeper, older sense of things restored to their correct position. Victoria made a sound, not words. Something that had been minutes ago the composed and authoritative voice of a general manager, and was now simply grief and humiliation, and the sound a person makes when the distance between who they believe themselves to be and what they have actually done collapses all at once. Her posture broke. Her shoulders came forward. She wept. Kevin's camera caught it all. He was crying too openly without embarrassment because he was 19 years old, and he had just watched an impossible thing become true in real time, and some things are simply allowed to affect you. The officers walked Victoria toward the doors. The patrons stepped back, opening a path. The woman in the camel coat looked away. The 2 men in blazers did not. Victoria moved through the boutique she had commanded for 6 years past the crystal cases and the silk gowns and the Italian marble she had maintained with the specific rigid pride of someone who confused stewardship with ownership. And she walked past the display stand where the midnight blue gown still hung, and past the spot on the floor where Rachel had stood with her hands open and her chin level while being told she did not belong here. At the door she turned, involuntary. The movement of someone who cannot help looking back. Richard was watching her go. He waited until she was fully facing him. "People like you," he said quietly without heat, with the precision of a door closing on something finished, "don't belong in a place like this." The glass doors opened. Victoria was walked through them. The doors swung shut. The boutique was silent. Then Richard turned to his daughter. Rachel was looking at the doors, at the spot where Victoria had been. At the showroom floor, this vast, cold, immaculate space that had tried 1 hour and 17 minutes ago to reduce her to something small and disposable. She breathed. Richard reached out. His hand found her shoulder, careful and uncertain, the touch of a man who is not yet sure of his welcome and is asking permission with the gesture itself. Rachel looked at him. At this stranger who was not a stranger. At the silver-haired man who had carried a jewelry blueprint in a briefcase for 22 years. She stepped forward. She closed the distance. They stood together in the center of the showroom floor in the chandelier light in the white lily scent that no longer felt suffocating, while Kevin's camera recorded it quietly. And 47,000 people watched a 22-year silence finally end. On the floor near the far display case, Victoria's gold-plated clipboard lay exactly where it had fallen. Nobody touched it. Nobody would. Outside, the Maybach waited at the curb patient, and still the way certain things wait when they have always known they would be needed. Rachel's digital watch read 3 p.m. exactly. She did not look at it. She already knew. The truth doesn't just knock. Sometimes it breaks the door down.
Fiction. But your need for justice is real. I've always hated arrogant gatekeepers who abuse their power to make others feel small. What would you do if you realized you just assaulted the owner's daughter? Drop a comment, like, share, subscribe.